I'm going to attempt to assign grades objectively as we are at the halfway point of the 2019 Ohio State football season. Recognizing pretty much the whole team, almost the whole team, would get an A at this point, I'm going to grade on a curve. That's going to make things a little bit more interesting. I'm going to talk about where Ohio State sits, both unit by unit and in the greater scheme of the college football season. That's next on the Unscripted Ohio podcast.
You are now listening to the Unscripted Ohio podcast, brought to you by Buckeye Grove and in part by JFQ Lending. All your home purchase and refinance needs should be handled by a Buckeye. You'll never pay for your appraisal with these guys. Licensed in 33 states and more on the way. Check them out at jfqlending.com. For the latest news, notes, analysis, and discussion, check us out on BuckeyeGrove.com and follow us on Twitter at UnscriptedOhio1. Now, broadcasting from Podcast Central, a place that is not his mother's basement.
Hey, Ma! Can we get some meatloaf?
We promise. Here's your host, Kyle Lamb.
Hey, Ma! The meatloaf!
6 games, 6 wins in the book for the Ohio State Buckeyes. Let's talk about it. A little coffee talk, like butter. Linda Richmond. Let's have a little discussion at where Ohio State sits. They're 6-0, bye week, then Northwestern coming up next Friday, followed by a huge showdown at home against Wisconsin, and then another bye week. That's 3 out of the next 4 Saturdays. You will not be seeing Ohio State football. Welcome to the Unscripted Ohio podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Lamb. We are here thanks to Buckeye Grove, as well as our title sponsor, JFQ Lending. All of your mortgage and refinance needs should be handled by a Buckeye, licensed in 33 states, and more on the way. Please check them out at jfqlending.com. We are also here with support from GoBus, with over 40 stops across Ohio, with popular destinations like the Hocking Hills, Mohican State Park, and Ohio's big cities. Check them out at ridegobus.com, or you can book them 1-888-95-GO-BUS. So yes, the Buckeyes are 6-0. They have looked mighty impressive in doing so. It's really hard to go through and give grades that are not A's or A minuses, or even in some cases A pluses. There's really not a unit on the field that, just looking in isolation, objectively, that I wouldn't give an A right now, except one exception. And that is Blake Hobbio, a kicker. This is a guy that was the number 1 kicker in the country coming out of high school. He's got a leg, but he has not been very accurate. He's missed a couple of kicks inside the 20. Interestingly enough, if you look at Ohio State's red zone percentage right now, it's actually, down at we're having this discussion on Twitter. PJ, shout out to you. I know you and I were talking about this on Twitter. Ohio State only ranks number 36 in red zone percentage. And that looks worrisome when you just look at the statistic alone. You think to yourself, 36 out of 130 Division I FBS teams right now. That doesn't seem very good. But when you dig deeper into that stat, red zone percentage, as it is presented on NCAA's statistics page, is just a measure of total trips inside the 20 and total opportunities and total scores. So if you score a touchdown, that just counts as 1 score. If you score a field goal, that counts as 1 score. So it's total scores divided by total opportunities. When you look at it from that standpoint, Ohio State is only number 36 in the country. But here is the deeper analysis of that. Ohio State is actually scoring touchdowns on 82% of their trips inside the 20, which is top 5 in the country. That is actually the second best number out of all of the current top 10 teams. So Ohio State is doing very, very well when they get into the red zone. The only problem is that when they haven't scored a touchdown, they've missed a couple of field goals. And that is something that could kick them in the butt in a closer game later this season. So if I'm looking unit by unit, the only spot on the field that I would not give them an A right now is the kicking game. That has got to get better. Habio, again, he's too talented to be missing 37-yard field goals, okay? They've just got to improve that as the season goes along. I keep saying it, at some point, they're going to have a single-digit game, a game that is played to within a possession that comes down to a fourth-quarter game. I got to think at some point. There's only been one team in the last 20 years, the BCS/college football playoff era, one team that didn't have one of those games in the regular season. That was Florida State back in 2012. So it's coming. It's going to happen at some point. So the kicking has to get better. But I'm going to start at the top, though. The obvious surprise for me right now, as we sit 6-0 halfway through the Ohio State regular season, is Justin Fields. And I'm not surprised by the talent. I'm not surprised that he's having a good year. But I really did not think that we would be at this point. I kind of thought he would be a little sluggish out of the gate. I actually, to be honest, thought that coming into the year, they might have a loss by now, either to Nebraska on the road in Lincoln or this past week Michigan State game. I thought one of those games would probably be a loss if you had asked me back in August. I remember back in August, I predicted 10-2 regular season for Ohio State. Now I'm bumping that up. I'm going to say 12-0. I'm not guaranteeing it or taking it to the bank, but I do think this team has what it takes to get through these last 6 games of the regular season. It's not going to be easy. I'm not going to feign a lot of interest in the Northwestern game next Friday, but the Wisconsin game, definitely one of those that, hey, it's very losable. You've got the Penn State game right before the game, and then you've got obviously going to Ann Arbor. I don't care how poorly Michigan has played so far. That is a game that you got to take seriously. It just is. But I didn't think Fields would be at this point in his development, and he's just looked great. Right now, Pro Football Focus has him as the number 2 rated quarterback in the country using their adjusted rating system that accounts for throwaways and drops and those sorts of things. He is number 2 in the country in adjusted rating, behind only Joe Burrow down there on the Bayou at LSU, former Ohio State quarterback. Who would have thought that? I said jokingly a few weeks back, 3-4 weeks ago, I said Joe Burrow, Justin Fields, 1 and 2 best quarterbacks in the country. Changed my mind. And here we are. They are actually the 2 highest rated quarterbacks in adjusted rating according to Pro Football Focus. Tua, as you would probably expect, is number 3. And Jalen Hurts is actually number 6. He's down there a little bit further down the list. But Justin Fields and Joe Burrow have been the 2 best quarterbacks in the country. I'm going to talk a little bit about LSU later. I think Joe Burrow's legit. I actually think LSU, I'm a little more skeptical on LSU. I don't think that they have the run game that they've had in the past. And so to some degree, they're passing it more because they have to. And their defense has not been as stellar as they've had in the past. That's another issue. But Ohio State, Justin Fields, look, he has been almost flawless. He's had a couple ill-advised passes that he's gotten away with. Incredible passes, really, where he's thrown across his body on the run, thrown back into the middle of the field. Those are no-nos. You can't throw it back into the middle of the field late, but he's gotten away with it. The pass he threw last week, the interception that got picked off, it went over KJ Hill's head, and it looked to me that actually you could have looked at that play, and without being in the film room or in the quarterback room or seeing the discussion with the coaches, I can't say for sure who that was intended for or what he was thinking on that play, but it looked to me like it was not necessarily a miscommunication with KJ Hill. I think Garrett Wilson, who was standing down there on the goal line, was looking back towards Fields, and I think Fields was expecting Wilson to come back to the ball, and that just didn't happen and got picked off. It's a miscommunication either way, probably a throw that he shouldn't have made, but I actually don't think he overthrew Hill. I think it was a miscommunication in expecting Garrett Wilson to come back. But when I watch Fields, this offense is just so much better than what it's been the last couple of years. Because last year, Ohio State's offense, it really picked up at the end of last year. The pass game was so exceptional with Dwayne Haskins. But the run game never really hit its full stride. It was good the last 3 games of the year, but it was never at its full stride. They just could not run the ball consistently. And even the pass game took a while to really get going to kind of make up for that lack of run game. The year before, a couple years, of course, JT Barrett setting all those records as a runner and as a passer, but the offense never really was completely consistent because it didn't have the consistency in the pass game. This Ohio State offense right now has a runner and a thrower at quarterback, and that really sets it apart from these past Ohio State teams that we've seen in the last couple of years. And when you throw in an offensive line that is just mowing people and trucking them, trucking them over, opening up huge holes, J.K. Dobbins, I think, is playing the best he has played as a Buckeye. He's hitting holes with authority. He's bouncing it. He's seeing these little creases that he wasn't seeing last year. He's running people over, breaking tackles, getting into the secondary, and running by people. He really has become a complete running back right now. And you add in the receivers, the depth with guys like Master Teague, Garrett Wilson coming into his own, Ben Victor being consistent for the first time in his career. This offense is slowly getting better. And that's what I like about when you look just on the offensive side of the ball. There's actually room for growth with the Buckeyes right now. And I'm really, really digging that because I think the defense is carrying the team as a whole just because the defense not only has it improved from last year, night and day difference from last year, but I also think that the defense just stand alone without even considering where they've come from. The defense is it's actually, in my opinion, the most impressive defense in the country by a large margin. What's interesting about this is if you look at Pro Football Focus's their team ratings, which is basically just an aggregate of the individual plays within each game. The way they do this, and I'm not going to get into a long-winded explanation here. I don't want to bore you with the details. But they grade each player on a +2, -2 scale, up to +2 in half integer increments. So you could get a +0.5 or a +1 or a 1.5 or a 2 or a -0.5, -1, -1.5, etc. And then they just go through and normalize those and aggregate them all. Well, Ohio State's offense collectively is the second best offense in the country. And the defense, this is where it gets shocking. The defense has an aggregate rating of 200 right now. The second best defense in the country is 148, which is, interestingly enough, is Penn State. Georgia has the third best defense, and they're at like 120. So Ohio State is over 50 points over the second best defense in the country, and they're a good 70-some, 80-some ahead of number 3. That's how dominant the Ohio State defense has been on an individual basis. The sum of the parts, it's really incredible right now. I don't think it's the most talented defense that Ohio State has ever had, but when you've got guys like Chase Young being the second best rush end in the country right now, according to PFF, you've got Ja'Shawn Cornell being a top 5 defensive lineman on the interior. You've got Jordan Fuller, a top 5 safety. You've got Jeffrey Okuda, a top 5 corner. This defense is talented all over the place. And so when you throw in the best defense and the second best offense, you could argue they're the third or fourth best offense. That's a conversation that we could have. But when you put this together, Ohio State is clearly the most impressive team in the country right now. And when I look at people that are still voting Clemson number 1 or Alabama number 1, I can at least make a better case for Alabama because they're playing pretty well, albeit against bad competition. That's the interesting thing about this is you get Clemson fans and Georgia fans and Alabama fans saying, well, who has Ohio State played? Well, I'll tell you who they played. According to Sagarin, they played one of the top 20 best schedules in the country. That is better than every single undefeated team remaining in college football. So Ohio State has played a tough schedule. They may not have played a top 10 team or a top 20 team, but they have played several quality teams. Cincinnati beating UCF last week. Michigan State having a really good defense. One of the best defenses in the country, possibly. Indiana is a solid team. Indiana perennially is one of those teams that can go up the last 5, 6, 7 years. They can go up against an Ohio State or a Penn State or a Michigan State. They can go up with those teams. They just can't get the win. That's been their story for several years. And Nebraska, look, Nebraska is not the black shirt defense of the 90s. They're not the juggernaut offense. But for Ohio State to go in there and win 48-7, that's impressive. This Buckeye team has played a tough schedule. Not at the highest level. They haven't played the really tough teams that is going to take them to a 4-quarter game. But as a whole, they have played a tougher schedule than Alabama, than Clemson, than Georgia, all of those teams. And so if you're putting Alabama or Clemson at number 1 ahead of Ohio State, what are you watching? Again, I guess I can make a case for Alabama. They're playing pretty well. There is a real concern in their defensive front 7. They're not stopping the run as well. They don't have a very good depth, and that's really hurting them. Their offense is really good, but that defense is not as dominant as it's been in the past. It's not as stuffy. It allows bigger plays. They've been a little shaky at times. Clemson, I don't know what people were watching with Clemson. The only justification you can have number 1 is if you're giving them number 1 just because they're the defending champs. And I'm really not into that, by the way. I think that is an outdated practice that needs stopped ASAP. I don't believe teams should be number 1 until you beat them. This is a new season. This clearly isn't the same Clemson that won the title last year. Some of the names are different. Some of the names are the same. Some of the faces are the same. But this is not the same Clemson team. It just isn't. Watch them play. They are not playing like a top 5 team right now. And to be honest, I know a lot of people are assuming that they'll get it together and start playing like the Clemson we expected coming in. But I'm not sure that that's the case. They've got some gaps. They're not blowing people off the ball. They've got some big play receivers, big play backs. Etienne obviously is a explosive running back. But I don't think they're the team that's going to drive down consistently on you. Their line just doesn't seem to be at that point, and I'm not sure it will be. And interestingly enough, talent-wise, when you look preseason, when you look at 5 stars on the roster, 4 and 5 stars, this current Clemson roster is not even a top 5 team. That's the interesting thing about it, is they are not as talented 1 through 85 as Alabama or Ohio State or LSU. So I don't think Clemson is really ever going to get it fully going. Now, they may run the table because the ACC is just that bad. But Clemson is not on Ohio State's level. It's not on Alabama's level. It's not on Georgia's level. Right now, I'd put Ohio State number 1, bar none, and that's being objective. I just do not see a team that is playing on Ohio State's level right now. I'd probably put Alabama number 2. I might be inclined to put Georgia number 3, Oklahoma number 4. LSU has played a really bad schedule. The SEC quacks like to say Ohio State hasn't played anybody, but LSU has played almost every team that they've played is in the bottom half of college football defensively. Northwestern State, Georgia Southern, Texas. Texas's defense is ranked, I think, 68th or something along those lines. They're not a good defense. So LSU has played awesome as far as the pass game. Joe Burrow looks the part. But who have they played? Texas, that's a good win, no doubt. Will Texas give Oklahoma a game on Saturday? I think so. I think that'll be excellent. I look forward to that game, by the way. There's something about the symmetry of Texas and Oklahoma playing halfway through the season every year in Dallas, which is the halfway point between Norman and Austin. I love that Red River game. There's just something awesome about that. Like I said, it's symmetry. Halfway in distance and halfway through the season. I love that. Oklahoma, Texas is one of my favorite games. One of the best games for me was when I was a kid watching Oklahoma, Nebraska, and I'm sad that that's gone. But still, not going to get off topic. That's a little tangent that I could go on for hours if I really wanted to. But getting back to Ohio State, I think that they look legit. There are some other teams that are capable of beating him. I'm not going to predict I did predict an undefeated season, but I'm not going to take that to the bank. I'm not going to predict a playoff spot too much just yet, even though I think if they go undefeated, they're obviously in the playoffs. But I'm not going to get ahead of myself because there are some tough games. Is Penn State, how good are they really? I don't know, but they look really good. I saw Joel Klatt saying they're probably the most underrated team in the country, and I really agree with that. There is no way you can convince me they're not a top 10 team. They're probably a top 8 team. I think they may be better than Wisconsin. Now, Wisconsin, defensively, I love that team because they're so disciplined. They're fundamentally sound. They don't give up big plays. I think Wisconsin is the most consistent defense in the country right now, outside of Ohio State. Now, Penn State on both sides of the ball, probably more talented. Sean Clifford looks really good stepping in for Trace McSorley. Probably looks better than McSorley right now, especially as a passer. And KJ Hamler stepping up as a real weapon for them. I think Ohio State has its work cut out for it. It legitimately probably is the number 1 team in the country right now. But when you look at Wisconsin, Penn State, Michigan later on in the schedule, there are a lot of landmines. Defensively, Ohio State, I don't need to linger on this too much because you've seen how dominant they are. But Chase Young, the best pass rusher in the country right now, probably better than the Bosa's. Pete Warner has improved. Malik Harrison is a stud. Baron Browning really coming on. As you would expect, by the way, in that linebacking core out of those 4 guys, Warner, Harrison, Browning, and Borland. Borland is the lowest rated out of those 4 in the Pro Football Focus aggregate ratings. But interestingly enough, Borland does actually grade out as a plus player. That means he's above average, and he's still one of the top 25 percentile in linebackers, which just goes to show how good Ohio State has been, in that the 4th best linebacker Ohio State has in their aggregate production is still better than 75% of the linebackers out there. So Tuff Borland is not as good as those other 3, but he's getting the job done. Ohio State's linebackers are getting the job done. They've got the best pass rush in America right now, and they've got a secondary making plays behind it with 3 corners. They're really able to shut down the spread teams, the third wide receivers. I love where Ohio State is at. I just look at this, and I think Ohio State has room for improvement because of that offense. But I just think that what the Buckeyes are doing as a whole, I definitely think it's legit right now. Now, there's an interesting dichotomy. It's completely different what's going up north in Michigan, because that Michigan offense, by the way, the defense really impressive against Iowa. Now, Nathan Stanley last week looked like a statue. So I hesitate to give them too much credit defensively, just because that was the worst pocket awareness by a quarterback I think I've ever seen. Maybe not ever. That's probably exaggerating a little bit, but it was really bad. He got sacked, I think, 9 times, and I don't think he saw a blitz or pass rush coming more than a couple times all game. And it adds to how bad it was, because he's not good enough to escape pressure. He doesn't have quick feet. He's very slow to react. But I don't think he even saw it coming, which is troublesome. But I still give Michigan's defense credit because they played really well. They did get pressure because of the blitzing, and you got to give Don Brown credit. They weren't necessarily getting pressure from the front 4, so they decided to blitz, and it worked. They got to the quarterback. But I like Michigan's defense. They were able to completely stop the run and get to the quarterback, get pressure. And look, Michigan's secondary, I don't think, played as well when they did have time to throw. I don't think Michigan's secondary was as good as they wanted it to be, but it was good enough. I think the Michigan defense is going to be tough. Ohio State is going to have a problem playing Michigan defensively. Where the issue lies is that offensive game for Michigan is so bad. They can't run the ball. They've gone 100 and some carries since the last 20-plus yard run. It's insane. And Shea Patterson can't throw the ball downfield. And I saw him say this past week, well, as far as the criticism, well, we're not trying to be an explosive offense. What? You're not trying to be explosive. Every offense in America is trying to be explosive. Why aren't you? I know what he means, the context of that, I think, reading between the lines, is he's saying we're trying to take what the defense gives us. And if the defense gives us a 10-yard route to the sideline, then we're going to take that. That's what we're trying. We're not trying to force, going for 50, 60 yards at a time. There's some truth to that, but at the same time, ideally, every single offense would love nothing more than to take it to the house every single play. That's ultimately what your goal is. Your goal is to get it to the end zone. How you do it is completely up to you. It's based on scheme. It's based on personnel. It's based on the team you're playing. But you're trying to be explosive. I know what he meant, but that's still a lame cop-out. And this is the team that we're talking about. Their coach said they were hitting their stride. They think they're really close. If that's hitting your stride, then you've got very low expectations because that offense has just not been very good. It's not even a top 50 offense right now in yards per play. Shea Patterson can't throw the ball downfield. I think he's, just my opinion, I think he's got a little bit of a shoulder injury. I think that is affecting his arm strength. Because you notice when they do throw it up, it's just basically a rainbow that Nico Collins goes up and catches. Which, by the way, they should be doing more of that. Nico Collins is one of the best receivers in the country. He's not going to outrun you, but he's got great hand-eye coordination, great hands, high points to the ball as well as anybody in college football. Just keep doing that. Throw the ball 30 yards downfield and let Nico Collins go get it. But I think Patterson probably has a little bit of a dinged-up arm. I don't think he's able to get as much mustard on the ball. And they're not able to run the ball. Zach Charbonnet's been hurt. He's had a total of 22 carries in the last 3 games after 33 back in that Army game. So Michigan's in trouble. They're going to get better. Their passing game will come along, especially if, in fact, Patterson is hurt. He'll get better throughout the season. The problem for Michigan is not so much whether or not they're going to get better, which I think they will, but will they get good enough, quick enough? Because they've got Notre Dame, they've got Penn State, they've got Michigan State, and Ohio State. That's 4 really tough games on top of an Indiana team on the road that they've struggled with in the past. Who knows what you're going to get out of Maryland? Maryland is an up-and-down team. Still got some offensive talent there. It'll be interesting to watch Michigan's season. But I like Ohio State where they're at right now. I think Michigan is going to give them a game. Penn State and Wisconsin are the obvious games that everybody has to keep an eye on. I'm not going to pretend that I'm worried for Ohio State next week against Northwestern. I'll preview the Wildcats a little bit more in depth next week. But Northwestern's offense is like 126 or 127 out of 130. Sure, there's a chance that they could show up and play the game of their lives. That defense is still pretty good. Not as good as they've had the last couple of years, but good enough to keep them in a game. But with that offense as being as bad as it is, if Ohio State gives up more than 1 or 2 touchdowns, then you're going to have to scratch your heads and you're going to have to ask yourselves, did they look ahead to Wisconsin? Did they just not show up? Or not taking this team seriously? Or are there hidden vulnerabilities to this team that we weren't expecting? Now, I'm not saying that I'm expecting Northwestern to go out and score 20 points next week, but if that happens, that'll be a conversation we'll need to have on Unscripted Ohio the following week. It'll be interesting, but Ohio State's 6-0. I love where they're at right now. Like I said, every single unit right now, if I'm just grading in isolation, they're getting an A. If I grade on a curve, maybe the linebackers only get a B+, but they're so much improved over last year. And that would be maybe the weakest part of the team, and I don't know that there is a weak part of the team. I think this Ohio State team is legit. Not ready to predict national championships or college football playoffs or Big Ten championships just yet. But this is a special team brewing in Columbus, and I have a feeling, it's just a hunch, but we might see the second half synopsis of this season be just as glowing as the first. I think even though Ohio State is in for a lot of real tough tests on paper coming down the stretch, I think they've got it in them. I think they're going to get it done. I think this is going to be a fun season to watch for Ohio State because this is truly a special team. Like I said, PFF has it number 1. S&P Plus has Ohio State right there with Alabama, literally a 1/10 of a point difference in the S&P Plus ratings. This is a really, really good team. I think it's the best team in the country, most balanced team in the country. Probably the deepest Ohio State team we've ever seen. Maybe even more so than the 2015, 2014 teams. So we'll see what happens. Ohio State, bye week this week. Big college football weekend. Oklahoma, Texas, LSU, Florida, USC, Notre Dame, Wisconsin, Michigan State, Penn State, Iowa. A lot of great games coming up. Hope you kick it up on the couch, kick your feet back, get some refreshments, and watch some great college football. Next Friday, Ohio State will play Northwestern, and then the big showdown the week after that in the shoe, Ohio State and Wisconsin. That is going to do it for the Unscripted Ohio podcast. Remember, we are here every Monday, Wednesday, Friday on Buckeye Grove, as well as iTunes, SoundCloud, Google Play, Stitcher, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. You can catch our sister podcast, the Scarlet and Great podcast with Johnny Bullitt and Corey Thompson every Tuesday, Thursday. Chris Drew talking about the Cleveland Browns, took it on the chin against the 49ers last week, but the Dog Days podcast runs every Tuesday. And Shane Larson with Gridiron Game Time, talking college football every single Thursday here on Unscripted Ohio. Cavs Cast, by the way, Chris Drew coming back talking about the Cleveland Cavaliers will be debuting on October 23rd. That is the day of the Cleveland Cavs regular season debut. That is a Wednesday. The Cavs Cast will be a weekly show every single Wednesday here on Unscripted Ohio. So stay tuned for that. Very excited. Cavs fans, 2 weeks away from the debut of Cleveland Cavs here on Unscripted Ohio. Catch me on Twitter at KYLam8. Catch the show and the network on Twitter at UnscriptedOhio1. Hope everybody has a great weekend. We'll be back on Monday. Goodbye, everybody.
You can get new episodes of Unscripted Ohio on Mondays and Fridays exclusively at BuckeyeGrove.com or anytime on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on all things Ohio State.